Howdy y'all, welcome to Adventures with Kendall. Today we're going to learn about a special group behind the making of the Central Pacific, the Chinese workers. Now their work is something we need to appreciate as we go along this journey. Without them, the Central Pacific would not be what it was, nor will California be what it is today. And I can't wait to show you their hard work, especially on Donner Pass. Their landmark achievements are worth sharing. So let's get going and go learn about the Chinese workers on the Central Pacific. All aboard! Once again, we're back in old Sacramento, and more specifically, back in the Transcontinental Railroad story here at mile marker 0. During our visit to the California State Railroad Museum, we mentioned how the Central Pacific was built by mainly Chinese laborers. Well, now we're going into full detail about these guys and how they became part of this railroad story. Why did the Central Pacific hire Chinese laborers to build their railroad? Even though groundbreaking for the Central Pacific was on January 8, 1863, construction really began in October 26 of that year. Central Pacific needed 5,000 workers to build a railroad and only had 600. Charles Crocker, the Central Pacific's VP of construction, suggested to James Strobridge, his construction boss, to hire Chinese laborers. Many people suggested that they would be inferior to build a railroad. Crocker would usually respond by saying, "They built the Great Wall of China, didn't they?" However, the Central Pacific was not the first to hire Chinese to build the railroad. In 1858, 50 Chinese workers were hired by the California Central Railroad to build their line. Other Chinese crews were hired by the San Jose Railroad. But Charles Crocker needed more, thousands maybe, to build his railroad eastward. Many of these workers were from the Guangdong province of China. This province is near Hong Kong, and these guys were heading to San Francisco, where they'll board a train and head eastward toward their nearest construction site. There they will work for $26 to $30 per month on the work they have done, while their white counterparts will get $40 per month for the same job. Their first building achievement came in the spring of 1864 with Bloomer's Cut. Excavation for the cut was completed in November of that year, and the laying of track through the cut was completed in April 1865. It was hailed as the 8th wonder of the world after its completion. But their next big accomplishment will come in the fall of that year, with work beginning on 13 tunnels through the Sierra Nevada mountain range. Now before we get into that part of the story, let's head to our next destination, Donner Pass. Part of our trek to the old Central Pacific grade is the Immigrant Trail. This trail was traversed by the Stevens, Townsend, and Murphy Wagon Party, the first one to traverse the Sierra Nevada mountain range on November 24th, 1844. However, Donner Pass gets its name from the infamous Donner Party, a group of American pioneers who migrated to California in a wagon train from the Midwest. Delayed by multiple missteps along their trek, they spent the winter of 1846 and 1847 snowbound in the Sierra Nevada mountain range. It's quite fascinating to be on the Immigrant Trail. It has almost this quiet tone as you head to the Central Pacific grade. Fun fact, the Immigrant Trail also was the Lincoln Highway, and we're getting close to the old underpass. Due to the gap created by the Lincoln Highway, cars will be hit by trains as they go through the snow sheds. To solve this problem, an underpass was created so cars could go underneath the Central Pacific Railroad. It was a pleasant trek along the Immigrant Trail. through the beautiful vistas this place has to offer. And here we are with this great view of the Immigrant Trail, and of course this wonderful view of the area around Donner Lake. It is so beautiful. I'm standing on the Chinese Wall along the Central Pacific route to Promontory Summit, Utah. Over there is Highway 40. And over there, down below us, is the old Donner Pass Wagon Road. It's amazing to see how this winding road once held hundreds of wagons coming into California and also hundreds of automobiles as they trek through Donner Pass. It is quite remarkable to see this thing up close and personal. Anyway, the Chinese railroad workers grouped themselves into work communities. The crews had an hierarchy amongst them. The workers were grouped by skill or unskilled labor. The domestic labor for each crew would include a cook and a doctor to care for the workers. They also had a crew boss, who the CP would pay. He would then pool the wages and then distribute the pay to the crew based on the labor hierarchy amongst them. And besides the low pay, the Chinese workers had to pay room and board while their white counterparts did not. Despite this, the Chinese were able to save and send small amounts of money home to their families in China. This money will be used to help build schools, village halls, and guard towers for the villages for protection of invading forces. For their food, a network of growers and importers formed to provide a trans-Pacific supply chain. The Central Pacific had an exclusive arrangement with a contractor, Sisson Wallace & Company, for 2 train cars labeled China Store to provide food access for the Chinese workers. Their food consisted of the following: rice, dried vegetables, dried oysters, dried abalone, pork, poultry, tea, and hot water. Boiling the water for tea purified it of disease. The non-Chinese crews suffered from sickness and dysentery, while the Chinese did not. Here are some Chinese artifacts in the California State Railroad Museum. These were found along the Central Pacific route. By the spring of 1866, they were working on Cape Horn, packing explosives while hanging from baskets and slopes for excavation. Once the explosives went off and the grade was cleared, they laid 3 miles of track within the area. By July of that year, the rail line was completed to Dutch Flat, which was 69 miles from Sacramento. By August of 1867, the Summit Tunnel was completed. Also known as Tunnel 6, this tunnel is 1,659 feet long and is 124 feet deep into the rock. There is also Chinese Wall. Made from material that was dug out of the tunnels, this wall is built to hold up the grade for the line as it passed through Donner Pass. As you can see, it is quite impressive to look at up close, especially with this great view of the Donner Pass area. Throughout the Central Pacific's construction through Donner Pass, snow sheds were constructed over the line. These will protect the railroad from avalanches that the Sierra Nevadas will create from time to time, especially during winter. Today, you'll see the modern concrete structures that replaced the wooden snow sheds before the line was abandoned. However, once you get up to the old grade, you will find pieces of the original wooden snow sheds alongside the new concrete structures. After getting through the Sierra Nevada mountains, the Chinese continued to work on the Central Pacific through the states of Nevada and Utah. Some of the Chinese workers became labor contractors within the Central Pacific. They negotiated for their Chinese workers and they worked alongside them, unlike their white counterparts. One of them, Hung Hwa, started with the CP at Dutch Flat and worked throughout the build to Promontory Summit, Utah. On April 28, 1869, the Chinese crews would beat the Irish of the Union Pacific in laying 10 miles of track in a single day. The amount of track laid was 240 feet of rail laid down in 1 minute 20 seconds or 80 seconds per section. At the Golden Spike ceremony, eyewitness accounts confirm that it was the Chinese rail workers who laid the last rail of the Transcontinental Railroad at Promontory Summit, Utah. In fact, you could see two of them in the famous Golden Spike picture, despite one man's bogus attempt to cover one with his hat. After the spiking, CP construction boss James Strobridge held a private Golden Spike ceremony in his private car. He invited Hung Hwa and a few other Chinese workers, along with journalists, military officers, and other dignitaries, for food and drink for a job well done. But the story of the Chinese workers doesn't end there. For their work continued on building railroads throughout the West, especially within the state of California. In doing so, it made the Western United States more important. Their hard work made commerce possible on a vast scale and made travel to the West more affordable. It even helped the Victorian version of Amazon, Sears and Roebuck, with shipping their goods across the country. Their work also changed how Americans lived out in the West, especially in the state of California, where communities would spring up around train stations such as this one. It also pioneered government-financed capitalism and instilled national confidence within the United States. However, this progress took a heavy toll on the environment and increased racial conflicts within major cities, especially towards the very men who did all of this, the Chinese. So what happened to them despite all of this? Some of them returned to China, where they helped in the development of their villages and regions, including building the first railroads in China. Others remained in the United States, working in agriculture, mining, levee building along the rivers, or domestic services. A few went to work for the Central Pacific to upgrade construction or work on maintaining the railroad. This includes replacing wooden trestles with huge fills along the way. Others went to work for the Union Pacific. Then there are those who went to work on the new Southern Pacific Railroad and helped build the new railroad down south through the San Joaquin Valley from Sacramento to Los Angeles. One of their biggest accomplishments on this trek to Los Angeles is the Tehachapi Loop, which is a 3,779 feet spiral of railroad track within the Tehachapi mountain range. We'll visit this landmark in a future episode. As you can see, the work of the Chinese on the Central Pacific is quite impressive. But now, let's head back to the studio. I hope you had a great time learning about the Chinese workers. It was a privilege to tell their story, especially how their legacy is true and strong throughout the state of California. Without them, the state wouldn't be what it is today, a marvelous paradise. And I hope you're ready to learn more about the Central Pacific, because we're now going into the towns along the route. It'll be a blast to learn about each community, either created or assisted by the Central Pacific. Anyway, if you have a location for us to go on, comment or email down below. We would love to see your suggestions. And also subscribe and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We would love to see your faces. Now that's all the time we have here on Adventures of Kendall. See you later, folks, and may your gifts bless the world.